Okay, good evening. Thank you everybody for coming. Once again, thank you, Rabbi Levi Balkany, to you and your family for hosting this share here every time in your house. So tonight, the Mitzvah Shem, we're going to advance another blot over here in Perek Hasocher, the Gemara that your sons, the Talmidim of Olei Torah in 7th grade are learning in class. And we're holding on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis, and we're holding Ki Ha Da Amarava, the second to bottom line. So we're on the very bottom of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis. Just before where we're holding Ki Ha Da Amarava, we're technically in the middle of something, but it's almost like a new sugya. Just before Ki Ha Da Amarava, there was a contradiction between a brisa and a din that Rav quoted in the name of Rabbi, that if you hired workers when they came and they weren't able to do their job, do they get paid like a pile bottle, or do they get paid nothing at all? Meaning to pay them in full, everybody agrees you don't pay them in full. The job wasn't available to them. You know, it rained or something happened. But do they get paid like a pile bottle, or do they get paid nothing at all? There was like a stira. So the Gemara answer will depend if the owner, when he hired the workers, if he took them to the location of the job. So if they were taken to the location of the job, so they saw everything about this, about the topography and the, where this place is located. So they should have anticipated, if it rains, it might not be work. If this might happen. So it's their issue. But if the owner did not take them there the night before, and he didn't specify, he should have specified. If he didn't specify, so then it's his issue and he's going to have to pay, but even then, only like a pile bottle. So we made this clear distinction of when does an owner have to pay like a pile bottle, only if it's his problem. But if it's the worker's problem, then he doesn't have to pay them anything at all. That was the answer the Gemara suggested. And the Gemara has now like approved its answer, like we see, Ki Ha Da Amarava, second to bottom line, like this, that Rava taught us. Rava said, Hayman the Agar Agiri L'Rivka. If somebody hired workers to dig a ditch, to dig like a little canal around your field, V'asa Mitra. And what happened was, he hired them. He said, come tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, dig this ditch around my field. What happened was tonight it rained. Umal Yemaya. Thank you for coming. Good evening. Umal Yemaya, and the field got really wet, and it got full of water. It was maybe an inch of water, 2 inches of water. It was soaking wet ground. So now they were not able to do the work. It comes tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, and they can't do the job. So Zak the Gemara, or in the last few words of Ayam Vav on the base. So if the owner, if the guy, the balabas who hired the workers, showed the workers the night before, say to the pilim, it's their loss because they tore the field. And everybody has to anticipate rain. You always know it might rain. And they saw the field, and they should have known they're workers, right? Oh, if it's going to rain tonight, there's no way we're digging this ditch here. This ditch is on the bottom of a hill or whatever it may be. The water is going to run right here. This is their line of work, so it's their loss. However, if he hired workers, I want to hire you tomorrow to come dig a ditch or my field. So then, and he didn't specify if it rains, you won't be out of a job, and he didn't show them the place. So then, say to the balabais, it's going to be his loss, it's his problem. But like we established, you don't pay them in full, because at the end of the day, there's no work for them to do. You have to pay them the price of a pile of bottle, which is a lesser price. So again, we brought this din of Rava to help us answer the stira that we learned in last week's Gemara, and we answered that it makes a difference if you show the workers the field the night before, you didn't show them the field the night before. So that difference we see Rava says clearly applies to when somebody hires workers to make a ditch around this field, and then it rained. Now we have to pay attention. There's going to be a couple of cases now, like the habit of the Gemara is that sometimes when you bring a din from Rava about hiring workers and then it rained, and there's other similar dinim, so now it's what the Gemara does. V'amar Rava. We're going to bring related dinim to this din. But each case is slightly different. So we're holding, and whoever joined right now, it's almost don't have to do anything we learned until now, almost. So we're holding Daf Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top. V'amar Rava. Rava says another din. Hayman da'ayger iguri. Somebody who hires workers. Ledavla, he hires workers to water his field. So their job was going to be that they're going to take buckets and they're going to go to the nearby river or nearby well, and they're going to water the field. So not to dig a ditch, this is a different story. He hired them to actually water the field. Vasa Mitra, and then it rained. So then, say to the pilim, it's going to be the loss of the workers because they should have anticipated rain. They should know that it might rain. If it rains, obviously there's no job for us tomorrow to water a field, taken care of. However, also Nahara, if the river came, if the river that they sometimes the river overflows, and then when it overflows, they had like this whole system of these like little canals and these ditches that would bring the water from the high river out into the fields. So Asr Nahara, if the river overflowed, so then say to the balabas, it's the balabas's fault. In other words, meaning he still needs to pay them because he never told them that if the river might overflow, I won't need to hire you tomorrow. He never specified it to them. He didn't tell them. So if the river overflowed and there was no need to water the field tomorrow and he wasn't clear with them, so then it's his issue. He has to pay them. So again, in this case, the case that we just learned was a case where you hired workers to water your field. So if it rains, you don't have to pay them because everybody knows it might rain. If it might rain, there's no job of watering the field. But if a nar came, then the workers don't know that situation. They don't know that the nar might come.
It's not a standard thing also for the nar to raise.
Yeah, so it could be standard.
Like
Yeah,
they have
exactly.
stuff
Excellent question. So the question will be even stronger when we learn the next shtickle, but I'll say the answer now because Taisus talks about it. So the answer is, I know that there's maybe a river in town and it's standard for the river to overflow. I don't know that the field that you asked me to water for you tomorrow is a field that's connected to the system. Not everybody's connected to the system. So unless you specify, by the way, I'm part of the system, and if the river will overflow, I won't need your work.
You have to build part of the system.
No, in the olden days, Lavdafka, they didn't have technology, so they literally had just the gravity working for them, and you have to be nearby. It's a big city, big town, or big, field place, whatever you want to call it, farm. And if you're not clear with me, I don't know. Rain is something that everybody has to anticipate. So that was a story where I hired somebody to water my field, and the reason why there was no job for him tomorrow because it was done already, correct? Because the rain came or the river came. Now we have the opposite. Rabbi says another case. Somebody who hires workers to water his field, and what they're meant to do is take these buckets and go to the nearby river and schlep the water. However, the water stopped midday. The river dried out. There's no water, so there's no job. So the workers don't have what to do. So the Gemara says like this: if it's an unusual event, it never happens that the river stopped. Today it happened. The balabas should have never known about it. He should have not anticipated it. It was not his responsibility to notify the workers, hey, this might happen. This is completely an unusual event. So then it's like a hurricane came. It's like something unusual happened. Say to the pilot, it's going to be the loss of the workers. They're not going to get paid. Say, I hired you to water my field. Sorry, the river dried up. Sorry, I never warned you. I didn't have to warn you, and they're lost. They don't get paid. However, if it's avid the pasuk, if it's standard, then in the city, sometimes the river dries up. Sometimes the river has water flowing. Sometimes the river doesn't have water flowing. So then it will depend. Ibnei Masa, if they're from the town and they're supposed to know that they were hired to do watering job tomorrow, but the river might be dry because they're locals. So them say to the pilot, it's their loss because nobody should have warned them. Lav b'nei Masa, but if they are not locals and they have no way of knowing this, so then it's say to the balabais, it's the balabais' loss because he should have told them that, by the way, I'm hiring you to water my field tomorrow from this and this river. By the way, sometimes the river might dry up. There might not actually be work for you tomorrow. They have no way to anticipate that. So it's after this Gemara that where you asked where Taisus asks, how come over here the Gemara says it makes a difference if you're local or you're not a local? If you're local, we expect you to know that the river is going to stop. And if you're not a local, we don't expect you to know. Maybe in the last stickle about the river overflowing, which is the opposite case. Also, if you're local, you should have known that maybe sometimes the river overflows. And if you're not a local, you shouldn't know. So that's where Taisus asks this question. And then he answers what you asked before without knowing this Gemara. You asked it just like, shouldn't you know? He says, no, you don't have to know because Lav Davka, are you supposed to know that your field is necessarily going to get watered by the river overflowing? Not every field in town automatically gets watered by the river overflowing. If you want to see it inside, it's the Taisus Avid, the pasuk say to the Balabayas, and he says towards the end of the Taisus, he says the Elam Leida Inyan Sedeu, they don't have to know about his field in Bamina Nar L'Seicha, if the river will necessarily reach their field. Okay, so let's go back into the Gemara, and we're holding now. We're holding Amarava. It's about 10 lines from the bottom. The first word of the line is Pseida. So we're going through a bunch of dinim of Rava where you hired workers and something didn't go as planned. It either rained and you couldn't dig, or it rained, so there was no reason to water the field, or the river overflowed, or the river stopped. And now we have another din, about 10 lines from the top, approximately. V'Amarava, Hayman, the Oiger Egorila Vidita, somebody who hires workers to do work. So he said, let's say I want you to move. I'm going to make up an example. I want you to be my movers. I live in an apartment, I'm moving into another apartment, another house. I'm hiring you tomorrow from 9 to 4, and you're going to move. And now what happened was, it comes 2 p.m., the middle of the day, and the job is done. So he hires them 9 to 4 to be his movers, and that's it. They finish moving. What are they going to do now? But they're hired till 4 o'clock. So what's the halacha here? So if he has more work that's easier than the original job that he gave them, something that's easier than moving, so then Yahivlu, he's allowed to tell his workers, listen, I hired you till 4. I understand I hired you to be my movers and the job is done, but now please do this for me, clean my backyard or take out the boxes, something easier, you're allowed to tell them. Inami, or also the kavasa, if it's equal. If it's the same level type of work, also mafkidlu, you may instruct them, you may tell them, you may command them to do that. However, the kashamina, if you only have work available that's harder than what they were originally hired for, that you're not allowed to tell them to do. So easier you can, equal you can, harder you may not. However, you have to pay them in full for those next 2 hours. Even though there's no work for them, you got to pay them in full. So right away, Frek the Gemara, this is Bamshach to the whole last sugi that we had. Frek the Gemara, Amai, why do you have to pay them in full? We had all these stories already. When there's no work, you pay like a pile bottle. So for these 2 hours, he should pay them like a pile bottle. Because at the end of the day, they're sitting around and relaxing. So Amai, why do you have to pay them in full? Why does Rava say pay them in full? Relates to Luka pile bottle. You should at least pay them only like a pile bottle for those 2 hours because he has no work to give them. So, and for the Gemara, you're right. Of course, usually the halacha is like we learned in the Brisa on last Amud, and like we just quoted in a bunch of dinin that when you need to pay, you pay like a pale bottle. That's correct. But Rava was talking about it in a very specific case. In a very specific case, the workers need to get paid in full, even though they're doing nothing. What's the case? Kika Marava. When did Rava say this? Ba'achlushi de mechuzah. We're dealing with the population of the people who live in a town called mechuzah. That these people, the Ilay Avdi Chalshi. That if they don't do work, if you just sit around, it makes them weaker, and it hurts them and it ruins them. So therefore, you have to pay them in full because it's not a service for them. Usually, the whole idea of pile bottles, you go to a guy and you say, "Listen, I hired you $20 an hour to schlep. How much would you be willing to take less and not schlep?" The guy says, not to have to schlep, 15 an hour is good. That's how you calculate pile bottle. You kind of have that conversation with the person. How much would you be willing to take not to have to work? These people are never willing not to work. They actually want to work because if they don't work, it harms them. Now, something interesting happened in yeshiva one time. I was talking to our longtime kitchen. He sets up the kitchen. He serves. His name is Isma. Anybody here who's been to Alter knows Isma, right? And Isma was telling me how he works in Alter for 35 years, and he never ever took a day off, and that he loves to work. And he starts telling me that if I don't work, I get sick and my back starts hurting me and it's not good for me to have a day off. And I love my job and I love the kids. And he was going on how he must work. So then but he was going on that if he doesn't work, it really, really hurts him. He needs to get up every day and go to work. So after, I wish I caught the real candid conversation because that's mamish achlushi the mechuzah. However, I didn't, but then I went over to him when we got up to this Gemara, 2-3 years ago. I'll play the video for you. I went over to him and I asked him. So the teachers in class, it's a short video, 24 seconds. They showed this video to the boys after they learned about Choshen Mechuzah. You see, it's a real thing. You have someone who works in our yeshiva, and he says, "I don't go to work." He says, "My belly gets full, my back starts hurting." So I'll play the video. You should be able to hear it. The volume should be good.
Isma, good morning. How are you? Isma, one time you told me that you like to work in Alitera. What happens to you when you stay home? What happens?
I feel sick.
What happens when you stay home?
Because my back hit, my belly comes so big, and I'm walking, I have more power.
And if you stay home, you feel good or you don't feel good?
I don't feel good.
Interesting. So you like to go to work?
Yeah.
It's the whole story. But that was here. I'm interviewing him. I'm like, but it happened that he, told it to me. I'm like, oh, this is the Gemara that we learned. So I got that. I got that recorded.
Would there be any difference that by the field you hire them to do a job?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the whole field? When you're moving, the example you gave, you tell them moving from 10 to 4, you're hired.
Right.
Let's say so. Even if they finish at 2, you have to pay them till 4. as opposed to not with kapaya batal.
So no, so according to halacha, if I hire you to do work and the job ended or for some reason the job couldn't take place, then saying maybe my example is not so good.
No,
Yeah.
the Gemara I'm saying, you could say there should be a chiluk, no?
If what?
If you're hiring, I don't know, you gave that example, says on the Gemara.
The Gemara on last page had an example. You hired workers to go pick up wheat. You say, go next town. I made an order, and they go there and the order's not ready. So they're sitting and they're doing nothing and they come back empty-handed. What?
Saying not by the hour. I'm saying, the Gemara didn't give an example, you hired from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
He's talking about contract work.
No,
It would be a difference if.
the Gemara talks about both. If it's a kablan or a skiryayim, if it's by the hour, if it's by the job, it gets into that actually. Yeah.
Like by me, by
Yeah.
my work, if
Yeah.
I work half a day, yeah,
Yeah.
I clock in.
Mhm.
Well, half a day, a lot of times I got no work. They can't force me to go home. I can sit the rest of the day and do nothing until I clock out.
So
They
they,
can't force
but they
me.
can't pay like Perek Hasocher either because it's probably
No,
not how it works now in the United
But I'm
States.
saying
But
in
then-
general, like
yeah.
every day, half a day, I got nothing on.
So
I'm
saying
sitting
sometimes
there
you go to
saying,
work and they don't have work for you,
Exactly.
but they can't send you home either
Exactly.
because they want you on because they benefit from having you on call. So some days they do have work for you. So that's what they agreed to pay you. Yeah. Okay. So now that was easy. The beginning of today's show was easy. We did a couple of dinim of Amarava. Not that it's going to get too hard now, but now we're going to get into we have to revisit what we learned in the Brisa on Daf Ayin Vav base. So I'm going to try to make a little hakdama now. Now we'll be able to understand. In our Brisa, we had a very big machlekes between Chachamim and Rabbi Daisa. And the general machlekes is it's the Gemara we're going to learn how it's going to explain it, but I'm going to explain it already in the hakdama. Chachamim hold that Yad Poil Al Yaina, the employee has the upper hand. And Rabbi Daisa holds that Yad Poil Al Tachtaina, the employee has the lower hand. So, just want to make sure I said that right. Yeah. Chachamim hold Yad Poil Al Yaina, Rabbi Daisa holds Yad Poil Al Tachtaina. So what's the example that a Brisa on Daf Ayin Vav on the base said? The example was where I hired a kablan. I hired somebody not per hour, not skiryam. I hired a kablan, and it told me you're going to get two slayim to sew to make a shirt for me, or two slayim to cut my grass or something like that. Here's a job, and here's a set price, and it's two slayim. So just let's remind ourselves the breakdown. A sela is made out of 2 shekel, or it's made out of 4 dinarim. So like a sela is like $1, and it has either a $half and $2 half in it, or 4 quarters. A dinar is like a quarter. So you have the sela. We can forget about the shekel. We can just use sela and dinar. You have a sela, and then you have the dinar. Every sela is made out of 4 dinar, so it's 4 quarters. So you hired somebody to do a job for 2 slayim to make a shirt, or for 2 slayim to cut your grass. And then in the middle of the day, the workers back out of the job, or the owners. Okay, so it could go both ways. But in the middle of the day, let's talk about the workers. In the middle of the day, the workers back out of the job, and they did half the job. They cut half the lawn. They mowed half the lawn. So what happens right now? Now the story is that in the middle of the day, the price went up. So in the morning, the guy was able to hire a guy for $2 to mow his lawn. Now they did half and they quit. But in order for him to find people to do the second half, it's going to cost him $1.50. He's going to need 6 dinar, not just one more sela, not just one more dollar. He's going to need 6 dinar. He's going to need $1.50. So the Chachamim say, Yad Poil Al Yaina, a worker has a right. There's workers' rights. A worker has a right to quit. You hired me for 2 slayim. I did 50% of the job. You owe me $1. 50% is 50%. Pay me my $1. The Rabbi Daisa in our Brisa, which is also the author of our original Mishnah in the beginning of Hasocher, it's Rabbi Daisa's opinion. Rabbi Daisa says, no, Yad Poil Al Tachtaina, I hired you to do the job. You can't just walk away. I mean, you could, but if you're going to walk away, and right now it's going to cost me $1.50 to complete the job, I only need to pay you 50 cents, whatever money I have left in the pot, because otherwise you're hurting me by quitting on me. So that's the machlekes. That's the chief machlekes. The machlekes is the Chachamim say if the price went up, it says Hayashava Vav Dinarim. That's the words of the Brisa. It went up to Vav Dinarim, which means it went up to $1.50. You still need to pay the original workers their $1 because they did half a job with their 1 sela. And Rabbi Daisa says no, Hayu Vav Dinarim. You pay the first workers only 2 dinarim because you need 6 dinarim left to now get the job done. That's the machlekes. Now each of them, after they say their din, Hayu Vav Dinarim, how much you need to pay, they each continue, and their wording that they continue is as follows. The Brisa says, and it says it by the Chachamim's opinion, and then when the Seif of the Brisa repeats it, it says also by Rabbi Daisa's opinion. So then it says, or if they want, Yigmar Melachtan, they could just complete the job, V'yitlu Shnei Slayim. They could complete the job and get the 2 slayim, that you made up to give them, which seems pretty obvious, and that's going to bother the Gemara. What are they adding by these words? It seems pretty obvious that if they want to not back out and they want to continue to do the work like they were meant to do, complete the work and you'll get the 2 slime. That's the price we made up this morning. We're going to go with that. And then the Brisa adds more. And then the Brisa says, the Brisa says, Sela, if the price to do the second half is only going to be a Sela like it originally was, and they do quit, so then Naisalem Sela. In other words, if the price didn't change, the Brisa seems to be saying something also very obvious. If the price didn't change, they hired them for 2 slime and they quit half job, and it only costs a seller to complete the job, which is what you would expect it to be. Half the job was 2 slime, so half a seller. So then you only pay them a seller. Now that's pretty obvious. We need the machlokes. There's only a dispute when the job became more expensive for the rest of the day. Do the workers lose out? Do they get their $1? Do they only get their 50 cents? But the Brisa, by each of them, Sai when the Brisa is mentioning Chachamim's opinion, and Sai when the Brisa is mentioning Rabbi Dais's opinion, it adds by each of them this case, they could finish their job and take 2 slime. And then it adds even more. By the way, if the remaining price is only a seller and they did half the job, so nice themselves, they get 1 seller for the half that they did, which seems also extremely obvious. And we know that a Brisa doesn't say anything that's obvious. So we're going to have to go through it. What do we mean to, what we obviously need to be talking about a case that we would have thought otherwise, that there would be some reason, even if it's a little far-fetched, but some reason to think otherwise. And the Brisa said to teach us, no, this is how the halacha is. But for such an obvious case, it can't be that that's what our Brisa is talking about. That's going to take care of the Gemara almost to the bottom of the page. So we could now focus on doing it inside and go through case by case. We're holding Amar Mar. So the first word of the line is the word Chalshi, and we're holding by Amar Mar. Whenever the Gemara says Amar Mar, we're quoting a previous Mishnah or Brisa that was brought down in the Gemara, and now we're elaborating to explain that Brisa. So Amar Mar, we previously learned in a Brisa, was on Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis. We learned it in last year that Sham in Lahan Masha Asu, that if the price went up to 6 dinarim, so you make a cheshbon how much they already got done. Kate said, for example, Hayafa Shisha dinarim, if right now to complete the job is going to cost Shisha dinarim, Naisalim Sela, they still get a Sela for the half that they did. So here's where that's quoting the Brisa. Here's what the Gemara jumps in. Gemara says, because Sabri, the Chachamim, they were the first opinion in the Brisa. They hold Yad Pailal Yainal, that there's workers' rights and the worker has the upper hand. So worker could quit half job and he gets paid half. It's going to cost you Vav dinar to complete the job, so it'll cost you that. Too bad. But then they continued, Chachamim continued to say, we're quoting the Brisa again, or if they want, they could continue and complete the whole job, finish the lawn or finish the shirt, and they could get the 2 slime that we made up that they should get. That seems to be obvious. That seems to be obvious that if they're going to finish the job and they're going to do what we made up, that they're going to get paid in full, the 2 slime. Why would I think otherwise? They should get paid more, should get paid less. Like, why would I think otherwise? So we're not talking about the obvious case. Yeah.
Well, because now we established that it costs more to do the job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a question whether they should still get the original amount.
Or
Maybe they should get more.
Why should they get more?
Because it costs more to do it. So once you stop and they said, okay, we're only going to do half, we're going to walk away. If they're going to come back to the table, it's sort of like a renegotiation.
No, so if it's a renegotiation, so that's what we're going to talk about right now. So let's do the Gemara inside. If it's a renegotiation, you're right. But if they just decide to continue, then this is we have a contract from this morning.
So they're fine.
Yeah.
We said they have workers' rights, but not enough rights to renegotiate.
Exactly. It's exactly the point Gemara is going to make right here.
Rabbi talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just not clear on the premise.
Mm-hmm.
If you're hiring somebody, if you have a contract with somebody to do a job and they do half of it, they've completely not fulfilled the contract 100%.
So
They haven't fulfilled half the contract. The contract is to do the job. Half of the job is not half of the contract. It's none of the contract.
So there's 2 things here. Number one is whenever there's a clear contract, that we're very accustomed these days to having very clear contract and there's clauses and everything's thought out. There's nothing to talk about. You could close the Gemara. You could close anything. Any contract that I make with you, as long as it's not against the law, our deal is our deal. Our word is our word. We got to keep it. So all the Gemara in all these cases, and in fact, every court case that will happen today is always when it's unclear. It's always when something was left not clear. There's something came up that's not clearly spelled out anywhere, and then you have to, try to understand what's right, what do they have in mind, what did he mean. That's so. In the olden days, this was, I guess, a quite normal thing. I hired you. It's not like we signed this contract. We didn't have all these clauses that I'm only hiring you to complete the job. And if you didn't, But when you hired you to do something that's called a davar avad, we're going to have it later in today's Gemara, and then you don't do it. It's in our unwritten contract. You can't quit on me because then you're actually really hurting me. Because if I hired you to do something that's very, very timely, then you don't do it, I have a big loss. But if I hire you to mow my lawn and you quit, so no, it was fine. So you quit. So you didn't have to pay you half. I need to get more workers. They didn't have these contracts. That's one thing to always keep in mind, that everything here is when it's not spelled out clearly. Another thing is, keep in mind that we're very influenced by the American law. Not everything in the Torah and American law match. So the Torah sometimes is more lenient on somebody who caused damage than an American law. Like in Torah, if you were honest, you protected the animal, your responsibility went out on damage. As far as I know, in American law, if your dog is going to go and hurt someone, you're going to be responsible no matter what. Most likely. You say, I had a good leash, or no, it's not like that. Here, you're the lawyer. Tell us.
Every dog gets one free bite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you become a Tom, you become a Muad after one, right? And the Torah you get 3. So there you go. So we're very influenced by what we just assume is the norm, but it wasn't the norm back then, So that we always have to I think keep that in mind. So the Gemara says Pshita, it's obvious that if they completed the job that they made up to do, they're going to get paid that we made up to do. So Zak the Gemara, we're not talking about the obvious case. Tzricha, we're talking about the Yakar Avidita, that the price went up in the middle of the day. So the workers quit because hey, why should we do this job for 2 slayim? Right now, the price of workers went up. Let's quit. And now we can go find another job this afternoon for $1.50. So the workers walked away. And now what happened was, here's where the renegotiation happens. The Balabas came chasing after him and he said, please don't quit, please don't quit. And he threw something in there. And he said something to the effect, I'm going to make you happy. It's going to be good for you. Please don't quit. I'm going to make you happy. Let's just use that phrase. I'll make you happy. So they came back to work. And now comes the end of the day and he wants to pay them too. He's like, I'm going to pay you too because we made up 2 this morning. You tried quitting. I convinced you to come back, paying you 2. They're like, what do you mean? When we quit in the middle of the day, it's because the price went up. We were going to go somewhere else to get paid $1.50. When you said, please work for me, I'll make you happy, we understood that you meant you're going to pay us the new going rate. And he's like, no, I never said I'm going to pay you $1.50. When I said I'll make you happy, I meant I'll give you a coffee, give you a can of Coke, I'll give you a better lunch. I'll do something good for you. I never meant I'm going to pay you more. I made up this morning to pay you this rate. So that's the machlekes. Now, because according to Chachamim Yad Pailo Al Yaina, you may think that the workers could win this argument. So the halacha is, no, they don't win this argument. If they ended up agreeing to come back and the guy never clearly told him, I'm paying you more, even if he said something like, please work for me, I'll make you happy, he does not need to pay them more than 2. And that is what this extra few words in the Brisa are coming to teach us. So we'll do that inside. That the price went up and the workers, the workers, right? They quit. But also the Balbais went and he begged them to come back. Mahu the Tema, we would have thought Matsu Amrile, that the workers could tell the Balabas, Kim Ifasinon, when you convinced us to come back, Adaita, the Tafas Lana Agra, we had in mind that you're going to add money to our salary. Kamash Malan comes the Brisa Chacham come to teach us, the Amarluhu, that he's able to tell them, no, I never meant to give you more money. Adaita, the Tarachna Luchubachil Vishtia. I'll be more matriach to give you better food and better drink, but I never intended to give you more money. And this is the classic case where we have to read people's intentions and it wasn't spelled out. And the Chachamim Paskin, that even though we hold Yad Pailo Al Yaina, that is that they have a right to quit and walk away. But if they're going to keep the original contract, you can't play around with that. That's what the Chachamim hold. Then the Chachamim continued to say, we're quoting the Brisa again, Sela, but if the price remains that to complete the second half of the job will only be 1 Sela, so then Naislam Sela, pay them a Sela for the first half of the day. Correct. The Gemara also Pshita, that seems to be like really obvious. Like, why not? So the job was a $2 job. They did half. It remains a $2 job, but they did half. Paid them $1, and it costs $1 to hire workers for the rest of the day. It's obvious. And the Gemara law, we're not talking about that obvious case, but Shricha, we're talking about an interesting case. That what happened was the Zol Avidita Mikara. In the morning, the going rate was actually cheaper. The going rate for this job wasn't 2 slayim, it was $1.50, it was 6 slayim. So how much is that for half the job? 3 for each half. It was a lower price. There was really the going rate was really cheaper. However, these workers, even though the going rate was only 6 slayim for this whole job, which is 3 slayim for each half, these workers, they only agreed to work for a little bit above the going rates. They only agreed to work if they're going to get 2 slayim for the job, which is 4 for each half, which is a dinar more than the going rate. That's what they only agreed to do. So the morning, the guy goes over to them, could I hire you for 6 slayim? They say, no, for us, we're only taking 4. So fine, he hires them for 4. He hires them for 4 for each half. So for 2 slayim in total. Now what happens was, now the price went up for everybody. These guys are chevrolet in the morning, they got a little more than the going rate. Now the going rate went up to 2 slayim across the board. We come between Zuzah and it went up more. So Ma'u the Tema, we might think that the workers here could have a tainer, because remember, they're coming with this power of the Chachamim, the Yad Pailo Yayna. So there's a little bit of a far-fetched tainer that they could say, Amrile, they could tell the Balabas, you promised us always a little more than the going rate. So now that the going rate went up, pay us a little more than the going rate. But no, Kamash Malan, the Chachamim come to teach us, the workers are not that powerful that they can insist on that. The Balabas has what to answer them back. The Amar Lahu, he can answer that back to them. Ki Amri Luchut Feizuza. When did I tell you I'm going to pay you more than the going rate? Do I have a Kim Luchut? You weren't willing to work for the cheaper rate, 6 slayim for the whole job. You wanted 2, so I had to pay you 2, but 2 you agreed to work for. But now Hashta Kim Luchut, 2 you agreed to, so I'm paying what we agreed to. So I don't have to now go pay you $250 because the rate went up. I never agreed to pay you. In other words, they want to look at it that you agreed to pay us more than the going rate. So whenever the rate will go up, their rates can automatically climb. He's like, I never looked at it that way. This morning the rate was so much, you didn't want to work, you only wanted to get paid this much. I agreed to pay it to you, but you agreed to work for this amount of money. By the way, I've had a story like that. With, hired somebody and then the standard salary went up. He was expecting that whatever, I don't want to see too many details, but Mamish, this Gemara actually once played out in my, little, what?
From the year from COVID, from the beginning of COVID to the end, everything tripled price.
Yeah. Rates. Yeah, I'm saying rate changing could be a very, very real thing if you work, especially with those type of, like wood and gas and things like that. 100%, it could be very real. You could really experience this. Okay, so that was the opinion of the Chachamim. Then the Brisa continued. The Rabbi Daisa says that it's Yad Palim Matachtaino. So he said the same story. So you have to shots up. You have to estimate how much it will cost to finish the job. If it's going to cost 6 dinar to complete the job, so then the original workers are only going to get 2 of the dinar, which is a shekel. A shekel is a half a selah. Maislam shekel, they get a shekel. So the Gemara, Kasavra Yad Palim Matachtaino, because Rabbi holds that workers have the lower hand. Fine. Then the Brisa continued, but if they want to complete their job, they can get the 2 slime that we made up. For the Gemara Pshita, that seems to be obvious. They got hired for 2 slime to do this job. That they're going to complete the job. They got paid their 2 slime. And for the Gemara Lai, we're not talking about the obvious case. We needed Rabbi Daisa to specify this din for the following case. That what happened, what happened was the price of workers went down. So the morning, the Balabas hired them for 2 slayim to cut his grass, and then middle of the day, it cost only 3 dinar for half a day of cutting grass. So the Balabas says, you know what, let me fire these workers, so I'm paying them a high rate, and I'll go find new workers for the cheaper rate. So Ve'emer Balabas, it's the opposite of the Gemara we learned a few lines ago. So Ve'emer Balabas, the Balabas walked away. He said, by the way, guys, you did half my loan, you shekayach. Here's your 1 selah, goodbye. Now I'm going to go find workers for cheaper because the price went down. And here it's the opposite. The Pilim went and they said, please let us finish our job. We'll make you really happy. We're going to be great workers. Please. And they begged them to have the job back. So Mahu the Tema, we may have thought Matzi Amar Lahu that the Balabas could tell them, Adaita that when you convinced me to take you back and you said you're going to make me happy, I had in mind that you meant you're going to be willing to work for the new lower rate. That's what I thought you meant. So I said, sure, you're willing to work for the new lower rate, I'll take you. Kamash Malam comes over there to teach us. No, when I say Yad Pail Ala Tachtaina, I don't mean to that extent that the Balbas to pay them the lower rate now if he kept them for the rest of the day. But the Amrile, they will tell him, when we said, please keep us and we're going to be good workers, the Amrile, they meant to tell him, Adaita Davdina Lachavida Shapirta, we're going to do a good job. You can do a job and you can do a good job. We just meant we'll make sure to do a really, really good job for you, but we never meant to get paid less than what we agreed on to just this morning. So what do you do in this case? So even though it's Yad Pail Ala Tachtaina, Rabbi Daisa says the workers over here, win. They win this argument. The workers are going to get the 2 slayim that they originally agreed to in the morning. And then Rav Daisa also went ahead and continued, but by the way, if it's Sela, the second half of the job will be a Sela, which is as expected. Nice little Sela, they should get a Sela for the first half, which is of course obvious. So for the Gemara, it's Pshita. So Amar Rav Huna, Breid Rav Nasan, Rav Huna Breid Rav Nasan says, it's not obvious. We're talking about a case. Tzricha, it's needed. The Oizlinu Inu Gabe Zuzam Ikara. They themselves agreed to work for cheaper. It's opposite of what we learned before. The going rate was, let's say, 5 dinar for a half a day. So it was really 250 for the whole day. The going rate was really 2.5 slayim. And they agreed to do the job first for 2 slayim. They agreed to do the job for 2 slayim. They went cheaper. Zila Avidita. And then at the end, the price went down for everybody. The cheap price that they agreed to work this morning became the going rate. So now the tema, we might think that the balabas over here could have the upper hand because Yad Pailot Achtaina. So the balabas Kataina, Batzir Zuzah Yehivnu Luchu. I'm going to give you now 1 zuz less than the new going rate because the going rate went down to what we made up this morning, and we made up to go a little under the going rate. So I'm going to give you even less. Kamash Malan comes to Rabbi to teach us the Amri Lay that they're the workers able to tell him. Ki Amarna Lecha Bebatzir Zuzah. Why did we this morning say we'll work for 2 slayim and not 2.5? Because we saw that you're not willing to hire someone for 2.5. You insisted on getting cheaper workers, so we agreed. But Hashta, now the L'Poil, you agreed to pay us 2. Kimlach, you need to pay us 2, and then you're going to, the workers are going to win this argument. So in short, this machlekes between Rav Deis and Chachamim, Yad Poil Al Yad Poil Tachtoina, only really plays out in a case where the workers quit midday, the price went up. Do we now calculate because the price went up, so the first workers take less, or do the first workers still get the half that they did? But any of these other cases where the workers and owner might argue, they kind of want to renegotiate the contract, we basically tell them no in all those cases, and we say we stick to what we made up this morning. That's basically what's happening.
If they quit, if the workers quit them halfway and the price stayed the same, I think the machlokes is still there.
Let's say the case. I hired you for 2 slayim. In the middle of the day, you did half the job, and you quit. And the price, it cost
6 dinar.
That is the case of the machlekes. Only then,
Right.
and only then is there a machlekes where it's Yad Poil Al Yain or Yad Poil Tachtoina. But the logic of Yad Poil Al Yain or Tachtoina is not stretched to other of these arguments. Over there, we maintain basically honor the contract of this morning. That's what we basically just went through. So now we're going to get into a real good Geshmak Gemara. So now we have a machlekes of Chachamim and Rav Daisa. So comes Rav, and Rav says, well, who the halacha is like, which is common. You have a machlekes Tanoim, and one of the Amirayim Paskins. So Amar Rav, we're about 2, 4, 6 lines from the bottom of Ein Zayin Amar Aleph. Amar Rav says, halacha ki Rav Daisa. The halacha is going to be like Rav Daisa, which means that Yad Poil Ala Tichtaina, the worker doesn't have a right to back out, and if he does, he's going to be the one to take the loss. Now we have a problem with that. We have a big contradiction. And so then Rav did Rav really say this? We know a statement from Rav where Rav says that a payal is allowed to resign and quit in the middle of the job, even in the middle of the day. So we have 2 contradictory, is that how you say contradictory statements? We have Rav's saying halacha Rav Daisa, and we have Rav saying that something over here is not adding up. So it's a problem, and we're going to spend a half a amud now reconciling this contradiction between the 2 statements of Rav. So the first the first thing that we're going to attempt to reconcile is to say the following answer. But the Gemara L'chatchila doesn't say it as an answer and then slug it up. The Gemara right away does what the Gemara often does. The Gemara, when it asks a question, to make the question stronger, he right away says, by the way, don't even think of answering me this, right? So the Gemara is going to say, and if you're going to want to answer me such and such and such, don't even think about it because I already have a way to refute that answer. So the Gemara says it that way. But when you learn it, it's important, especially with the children, it's important when you learn the v'chi tema, not to focus on, don't try to say this answer because it doesn't work. You have to pause for a moment and actually say the answer. See why it might have been a really beautiful answer. Kind of learn it as if it's an answer. So when I talk to the kids, I'm not the teacher, but when I go in the class, I say, don't v'chi tema to me. Tema it, like say it. I want you to make me the Gemara didn't slug it up. What would this beautiful answer may have looked like? And then we have to understand why it's only a v'chi tema, why you could only attempt to say this to me, but ultimately it's not a good answer. So I'm going to present it as an answer and an upshot. But the way the Gemara does it is if you're going to try to answer me this, by the way, I'm not going to accept that. So Gemara is going to try to answer the following. So we already touched on this earlier in the share. That there's two kind of workers. There's the Shiur Yom, who gets paid an hourly rate, and then there's the Kabbalah, who gets paid by the job. So there's two different kind of workers. So you're ready, if you have a Gemara cup, you already know we're heading somewhere. That Rav made two statements which seem to be a contradiction. One of the statements was talking about a Shiur Yom, and one of them was talking about a Kabbalah. Which one is which? So there's a very interesting din that we learn. It says in the Torah that the Eibusher says about the Yidden, Avadayhem, they are my servants. A Yid cannot be a slave to anybody else. We can only be slaves to Hashem. We could only be a slave to Hashem. I can't be a slave to somebody else. So therefore, a Shiur Yom, he's like a slave because you hire him and he's working for you. He's slaving for you. And if you don't give him those rights, you're actually turning him into a slave to the person who hired him. Like I say, you're not allowed to back out. You're not allowed to quit. That's like, so that's violating this principle that we have that you didn't have to be avadayhem, have to belong to Hashem. A kablan, he's not slaving for you, he's slaving for himself. A kablan is, I go to the cleaners and I say, I'll give you $10 to clean my shirt, I'll give you X amount of money, you build this house. So this guy, he's working for himself, he's not working for you, right? He's working to get the job done. So he could earn that money versus that he's your employee. It's different how you look at them. So the Gemara wants to suggest that we're going to answer that there's a difference between a Shiur Yom and a Kabbalah. When it comes to a Shiur Yom, and we have this, so to say, this special Torah employee rights that we can't turn them into a slave. So the Torah protects a Shiur Yom, and a Shiur Yom has a right to quit midday. But a Kabbalah doesn't have that protection. We don't have that issue where he's an Eved. Rashi says the Kabbalah is like an Eved to himself. He's not an Eved to you. So the Kabbalah doesn't have that special protection. So the Kabbalah has no right to quit. So if I hired you for $10 to mow my lawn, it wasn't an hourly rate, you have no right to quit on me. But if I hired you for 2 hours, you do have a right to quit on me 1 hour, and if you would like to. And that's perhaps an excellent answer that we could say, even though it seems like Rav has a contradiction. One place he says halacha krabdaisa. And one place he says that a worker could quit. Where he says a worker could quit, he's talking about a Shiur Yom. We offer them a certain Torah protection. And where he says you can't quit, we're talking about a Kabbalah. Now the Gemara says, if you're going to want to say this answer to me, you're not going to be able to say this answer to me. Why? We're going to learn it inside, but I'll give you the idea of the answer. Because we're going to find the brisa. We're going to find the brisa that makes no differentiation between Shiur Yom and Kabbalah, which have the same din. And we're going to prove, even though the brisa doesn't say a name, we're going to prove to you that this brisa is Rabbi, he's the author of the brisa. So if I have a proof, Rabbi holds that a Shiur Yom and Kabbalah have the same din, I can't now say this answer. How do I reconcile Rav's statements? One is Shiur Yom, one is Kabbalah. But he said halacha Rabbi himself never made that differentiation. So you can't say that Rav says halacha Rabbi is only here. And when he passed him, you could quit in the middle of the day is something else. Rabbi himself clearly said it about both. That's why you can't tell me this answer. So we'll do that inside. We'll go back to Amarav. Amarav we'll do only inside right now. 6 lines from the bottom. Amarav, Rav says halacha Rabbi, the halacha is like Rabbi, which means workers can't quit. Frak the Gemara mi Amarav achi. Did Rav really say this? But Rav said, a worker could quit even in the middle of the day. If you're going to want to try to suggest to me and tell me an answer, the shiny Leila Rabdaisa ben Schiros Kablanos, the Rabdaisa differentiates between a Shiur Yom and a Kabbalah, and a Kabbalah can't quit, and a Shiur Yom could quit, and that's why Rava says 2 statements. However, you won't be able to say that to me, shiny Lay. Does Rabdaisa make this differentiation? He very clearly doesn't. At least we're going to try to prove that right now. Because Vatanya, we learned in a brisa, this brisa has no name, but it says all right, maybe we're back up. It's back up. It did say no internet, and now it's back up, so we're good. I don't know if the recordings work, but we'll see what happens. Okay, shekayach. So Batanya, we learned in the Brisa, well, you hired a worker. Heard that somebody passed away. Or he got very sick. If this person was a sachir, you pay him a schar. So let's say he was an hourly worker. Make a cheshbon how many hours he worked and pay him accordingly. Im kablanu, this price is clearly talking about a sachir and a kablan. Im kablanu, and if he is a kablan, let's say he got certain amount to do this job. You make a cheshbon what percent of the job he did, and you pay him accordingly. So this brisa, whoever this brisa may be, clearly holds that a schar and kablan have the same din. Now, Mani, who must this brisa be like? If you want to say that this brisa goes according to the Chachamim, where they hold the workers allowed to quit, right? Remember, we learned Chachamim, Yad Pelol Yaina. So then, my area Shama Shameis Lemeis. Why would this brisa have to chap on? They're allowed to quit because somebody died. Or that he got very sick. The honest, when it's a case of honest. Kiloi honest nami. Even if had it not been in a case, also the Chachamim would have allowed you to quit. So could this brisa be chachamim? No way, it can't be chachamim. Because if it was chachamim, why would they say you're allowed to quit if somebody died? You're allowed to quit if you decided to quit. You can do whatever you want. So it can't be chachamim. So who must be the author of this brisa that you're only allowed to quit in a case of aynus? El alav, what must I say? Rabdaisihi. That this brisa is the opinion of Rabdaisa. And remember, in this brisa it said clearly that a sachir and a kablan have the same exact din. Ushma mina is a raya from this brisa. Loi shiny leila Rabdaisa ben schirs and kablanos. The Rabdaisa does not differentiate between schirs and kablanos, and schirs and kablanos have the same din. So our original question is back on. Rav made two statements that contradict each other. You may want to suggest that a sachir and a kablan are different, but I proved to you that this brisa must be Rabdaisa, and you see clearly that there is no differentiation between schirim and a kablan. So the original question is on. You could only bechitem the answer. You can't say the answer. So and for the Gemara, no. Really, it's a great answer. Really, it's an awesome answer. It's a perfect answer. That Rav's two statements. One is talking about a schirim, one is talking about a kablan. You have this brisa. You're not learning the brisa properly. This brisa wasn't talking about regular workers. It was talking about workers who are working in a davar avod. They were doing a job like the classic example in the Gemara always is. You have like this flax seeds and they soak and they become ready. And then when they get ready, you must take them out of the water. Otherwise, that's it. You lost your whole investment. So in that case, everybody agrees that if it's davar avod, you're not allowed to quit unless you have an aynus. You have an aynus. Somebody died. You got to go. Is what it is. So this brisa is not a proof. This brisa is not Reb Doisa, and then you have a proof that he doesn't make a differentiation. This brisa is Chachamim. It's Reb Doisa. It's everybody. This brisa is talking about a case of a davar avod, but you can't prove to me in a non-davar avod case. Maybe Reb Doisa does have this differentiation, and we're not saying maybe. We're actually suggesting that the differentiation is true. That a schiriyim and kablan are different, and that reconciles the contradiction of Rav. You brought me this brisa. This brisa is talking about a davar avod. This brisa is talking about a davar avod, and it's not only Reb Doisa, it's going with divrei hakel. So you have no raya from this brisa that schirim and kablan are the same. And our original answer that we suggested that schirim and kablan are different it remains, and we maintain that answer that schirim and kablan are different. Perfect answer. Now we're going to challenge the answer from our very own Mishnah in the beginning of Perek Hasocher. So, Frakti Gemara, Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, right? Tanya is a brisa, Tanan is a Mishnah. Here we're quoting our Mishnah. Tanan, we learned in our Mishnah, the end of our Mishnah, the first Mishnah of our Perek, it says, Kol hamishane yodei el tachtayna. If I hire you to do work for me, and whoever's the one who changes, he has the lower hand. Our Mishnah is Reb Doisa's opinion. And then it says, V'chol hachayzer by yodei el tachtayna. And whoever quits, it's yodei el tachtayna. So keep your finger on the place here, so we can find it. But everybody, let's turn back to the first Mishnah of Hasocher. So if you learn the first Mishnah of Hasocher, it's important to see this. If you look on the last line of over here on the bottom, on the last line, the Mishnah starts with Hasocher Somnim and goes through some cases, and then it says over there, the last line in the middle of the line, Hasocher Somnim v'chazru b'hem yodam al tachtayna. If you hired workers and you backed out, yodam tachtayna, which is the opinion of Reb Doisa. And then the Mishnah specifies, then the Mishnah says, Kol hamishane, whoever changes, yodei el tachtayna. What does that mean? Whoever changes, we'll tell you in a second. And then the Mishnah says again, Whoever quits, we just said a second ago, now we're repeating ourselves and we're saying Kol HaChayzer B'Yad HaTachtaina. Something is extra here in this Mishnah. How is this Mishnah meant to be learned? And our Mishnah goes like Reb Daisa. So the Gemara is going to say, you're forced to learn that when it says Hasocher Umnin, he was talking about the kablan, because the uman is a kablan. Uman is like the guy who's like a professional. He's a carpenter, he's a painter, he's a uman. And then when it says Kol HaChayzer B'Yad HaTachtaina, we're going to be mice of the pile, this Kiryayim. How else could you learn a Mishnah? You're forced to learn a Mishnah that there's a Hasocher Umnin and there's the Kol HaChayzer by. One's the Kiryayim, one's the kablan. They both have the same exact din. So I have a proof from our Mishnah that you may not differentiate. The Rabbi Daisa says Schiriyim and Kablan are different. He clearly, not so clearly, but we're proving from our Mishnah that Schiriyim and Kablan need to be the same. Because how else are you going to learn these words, these extra words in the Mishnah of Kol HaChayzer B'Yad? And we'll see it inside in a second. But now I'll just explain for a minute what's Kol Mishana Yad HaTachtaina. So there's an interesting thing. Kol Mishana means not where you resigned or quit. It literally means whoever changes. But the case is, Kol Mishana, the classic case for Kol Mishana is if I have a piece of white wool and I go to the paint, the guy, you call it dyer, like the person who dyes it. What's he called? Sounds like an interesting name. Either way, you give it to the guy who dyes the wool and you say, please dye this purple for me. So I want to have purple wool and then I could sell it, make money. And the guy makes it black. He goes there and he makes it black. So there's a famous machlekes of Rabbi and Rabbi Yehoshua. This Mishnah is brought down many times in many different Gemaras, so now it comes up. So Rabbi holds that if you change, you're a gazlan. The guy, if he dyed it black instead of red, he's a gazlan. So what has to happen right now is he keeps it, like anything that you steal, he keeps it. He made it black, he made a shina in it, and he has to pay the guy back for the piece of wool. So let's say the original piece of wool was $10. And I come to this guy and I say, please dye it back for me. And he was going to charge me, dye it purple for me. He was going to charge me whatever the fee is to dye it purple. He made it black. He now keeps the wool, but he's mechayev to reimburse the guy and pay him back for the full piece of wool. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, you're not a gazlan, and you don't have to reimburse the guy. And not just that, the guy who hired him has to pay him. Even if you made it the wrong color, I need to pay you. But it's Yadei al Techtaina, meaning the guy who did the wrong color loses out. I can pay a cheap rate. Which rate do I pay? So he says that I'll give you the cheaper rate. One of these two rates, either the rate of what the investment was to dye it purple. I'm going to explain it in a second, or what the profit is. Okay, so let me lay out a case. The case is I give the guy a piece of wool, it's white wool for $10. What does it cost to turn this white wool to purple? You have to have a little bit of wood to light a fire, and you have to get some kind of, some plants, whatever it is to make purple paint, and it cost the guy $3, not his work, not his time. What are the products that it cost him to turn this purple? It was a $3 investment, right? So he made a $3 investment. But because now that this white wool will turn purple, and it's only cost $3 to do that, now it sells on the market for like $20, right? So it's a $7 profit. Because the piece of wool itself costs $10. It costs $3 to turn it purple, but now it sells for $7, so there's a profit. So Rabbi Yehuda says you pay the lesser amount. In this case, the lesser amount is you pay him just the $3. It's called Demei HaYitzia, the amount of money that person spent to make it purple. What's if to make it purple cost like, $5? No, $7. Costs like $7 to make it purple, and then you sell it, it's only a $3 profit. So then I only have to give the guy $3, even though he spent $7 to make it purple. But because he took my white wool and I hired him to make it a certain color, and he made it the wrong color, and right now the profit's only this little, $2. I only pay him the $2. So the way he says it, he says Im Demei HaYitzia Yoser al Shavach. So then you give the shvach, you give the cheaper one, and Im Demei HaShvach Yoser al Yitzia, you pay the Demei HaYitzia. But again, there's a very big difference in what's happening, because if you have one guy, A, approaching guy 2, here's my wool, according to a mayor, if you change it to your gazlan, you have to pay back guy A for his wool completely. According to Yehuda, not just you don't pay him back, I actually need to pay you because you took my white wool and you did make it a color, so you made it better, but I pay a very, very, very cheap rate. So the Gemara is going to say, when our Mishnah is called Mashana Yad HaTachtaina, it seems also like Kol HaChayzer B'Yad, same thing, right? No, it's talking about the case of this case that we're talking about, and our Mishnah is like a star Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda. The Kol Mashana Yad HaTachtaina, that's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. That's the case. But in the last case, the Mishnah goes and repeats Kol HaChayzer B'Yad HaTachtaina. We just had that literally 2 lines ago. What must it mean? What must it mean? It means that we're adding a pile that even a Schiriyim, like a Kabbalah, have the same din, and it's Yadei al Techtaina. So, and our Mishnah is Rabbi Daisa, because Yadei al Techtaina is the opinion of Rabbi Daisa. So we have a proof from our Mishnah, not from the Brisa before we managed to push away the proof. From our Mishnah, it seems to be a really hard proof that Rav Daisa does not differentiate. So now our original question is back on. How could Rav say two statements that contradict each other? You try to answer me that we could differentiate. You can't. So we'll see that inside. Tanan, the practical Gemara. Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah. Kol Mashana, whoever changes Yadei Latachtaina, v'chol hachayzer by, and whoever quits Yadei Latachtaina. So Bishlama, I understand. Kol Mashani Yadei Latachtaina. When the Mishnah is adding these words, Kol Mashani Yadei Latachtaina, I understand the Sasam Lantana Rabbi Yehuda that our Mishnah is making a stamish like Rabbi Yehuda of that famous machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and Rameir about the tzemer. However, Ella, but that last line of the Mishnah, what's it coming to add? Lav, what must you say? La suyi payil, that it's coming to add a payil, which means a skir yaim, as opposed to an uman. Rab Daisa, and our Mishnah goes like Rab Daisa. So you see clearly that Rab Daisa does not differentiate. So our original question is back on. We have a contradiction in Rav's statement. And for the Gemara, a very interesting answer. And for the Gemara, Ella, rather, you're right. We concede this fact for now. We concede. Reb Daisa Tarti Kamer. Reb Daisa says two separate statements. He holds that a skir yaim is Yadei al Tachtaina, and he holds that a kabin is Yadei al Tachtaina. He holds it about both. It's two separate things that he holds. The Rav, who's the Amayru, who's now coming to Paskin Halacha, Savar like Kavasei Bechada. One of them, he agrees to Rabbi Daisa. Upali Galei Bechada, and Rav argues with Rabbi Daisa. Now Rav can't argue with Rabbi Daisa, but he basically takes Chachamim side on the other one. So Taka, you're proving to me from a Mishnah that Rabbi Daisa maintains his halacha, his opinion, Yadei Tachtaina, Sai Skir Yaim, Sai Kablan. But Rav was Taka Paskening, splitting it. That Kablan he holds like Chachamim, and that Skir Yaim he holds like Rabbi Daisa, and he doesn't agree with Rabbi Daisa completely. So this is the answer that we're able to offer right now. That Rav just basically is arguing with Rabbi Daisa halfway. The Gemara says, or if you want, I could answer, and I could teach you the Mishnah differently. So when I'm going to teach you the Mishnah differently now, what's going to happen? Then my original answer could come back on. That really Rabbi Daisa holds Chayim and Kabban are different. You tried to prove me from the Mishnah that it must be the same, but I have a different way to learn the Mishnah. So if I have a different way to learn the Mishnah, that proof is off. My original V'chitema could go back on. That's what the Gemara is going to do now. So Ibay said there's a lot of, you have to fill it in. Ibay say more if you want, I could give you another answer. I'm maintaining my original answer that Rabbi Daisa himself actually holds that Skir Yaim and Kablan are different. And you know what? You told me, what are you going to do with that last line of the Mishnah? I have something else that I can learn out of that line. Not to be Maisif or Skir Yaim. That's incorrect. Rabbi Daisa doesn't hold that. I'm going to be Maisif a different case about a case of sales. Separate case. We're going to see. What I can tell you is that last line of the Mishnah is able to be learned differently. That the din of Kol Chayzer B'Yad Tachtaina is Lachet Tanya is referring to the din, which is clearly spelled out in the following brisa. The brisa says, Kol Chayzer B'Keitza. What does Kol Chayzer B'Yad look like? So we're talking about a case of a seller and a buyer, not a balabas and a worker, but a seller and a buyer. I sell you my field for $1,000, and I only paid you $200 of it. And so I sell you a field for $1,000, and I pay only $200. And now we're going to talk about if the seller or the buyer want to back out. Who backs out? So if right now, after getting paid $200, the seller says, "I regret this deal. Stop. Pause the deal." So the buyer has the upper hand because this guy's backing out. I want to follow through on our agreement. So the lekech has the upper hand, the buyer. So what does it mean that he has the upper hand? He can make the following choice. He can tell the seller, you want to pause now? You don't want to sell me the field? We're stuck here $200. I want my money back. I'm not interested. If I can't buy the whole field, I want cash back. Give me my cash. Or if you say, you want to back out on the deal? Okay, you can back out on the deal, but the $200 that I paid you, $200 worth of the land, and now it's going to belong to me. The buyer has the upper hand. So he could say Tenli Ma'isi, or he could say Tenli Karka, Keneged Ma'isi. Mehechan Magbiyai. And where does the owner need to pay back? Where does the seller need to pay back the worker from if he owes him back money? It's to pay him back from Edis, which is the better kind of field. We'll talk about that soon. Now the Brisa continues, if the buyer is the one who backs out, so now the seller The seller has the upper hand. We're gonna end this here in like 2-3 minutes. The seller could say, here, take your money. He could tell the buyer, you backed out. I'm canceling the whole deal. Here's your money back, walk away. Or the seller could say, you're backing out. I'm forcing you to now, you pay 200, at least that part's done. You're going to keep now $200 worth of the field. Where does he pay him back? From a lesser quality kind of field. So that's the Brisa. Now Rav Shimon Gamliel, he's not arguing. Rav Shimon Gamliel is just instituting something really smart, which is known as the mortgage. Rav Shimon Gamliel, Rav Shimon says, we try to teach sellers and buyers not to do this, where they start backing out on each other. And in a case where you're buying a field for $1,000 and the guy only has $200, instead of viewing it as they only pay $200, view it that it's a down payment and that the rest is a loan, which is a mortgage. And you can't back out because the sales are 100% complete. And you owe me $800. It's like a loan. It's not that the sale didn't happen. So, and we'll do that inside in a second. But the bottom line of this brisa is that we're going to now say that the last line of our Mishnah, when it says kol chayza b'yad t'chtaina, is coming to be ma'aser. In this case, that the seller and buyer, whoever backs out, if it's a seller that backs out, he has the lower hand. The buyer backs out, he has the lower hand. And it's not coming to teach us that a poil also has a din, that a schiriyim also has a din like a kalban. And we are maintaining our original answer that schiriyim and kalban are different, and that helps us understand the two statements of Rav. But now let's just see Rav Shimon Gamliel's solution inside, and we're done. Rav Shimon Gamliel says, we say, we try to teach them that they shouldn't back out. Kate said, what do? You have to write a star. You write kaisuvla, you write ani pliny ben pliny, I so and so, macharti saw the pliny sold this specific field, lo pliny to so and so elef zuz for $1,000. V'nasam mehem esayim zuz. He paid me so for only 200 of it. V'arini noisha by chesmei zuz. And the other 800 he owes me like a loan. It's as if he borrowed it for me. It's as if he borrowed that $800 from me. Kana, the person is kaina the field, and it's a complete sale. There's no going back. The sale is 100% done. Now he has to pay up to $800. There's a loan. A few lakh kamashanim, it can take a couple of times. 15-year mortgage, 30-year mortgage, however you want to do it. So this is we're holding, but we went over time. We usually try to keep it to an hour. So thank you everybody for joining. And next week is a little bit of a continuation of this sugya, easy. And then we go to a brand new Mishnah on Ayin Chesam and Aleph. So next week we're going to finish the sugya and start a brand new sugya, a new Mishnah on Ayin Chesam and Aleph. Thank you very much for Levi Bolkany again for hosting us every time. We really appreciate it.